Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this show. As you see, that we have Patrick McKenna, who's the owner and founder of Infinite SD Inc., and he's got a better background than mine. And he lives, well, don't. Well, what is cool about this gentleman is not only did he attend my high school, and yes, we've had two others on the program who were from my high school, but he lives in Utopia. It's an actual city or town in Ontario called Utopia. Yes, I know, because there's also, for Christian believers like myself, there's also a Damascus, Ontario as well, just so you know.
And there's a Utopia, Texas.
Yes. Now, Patrick McKenna creates and produces truly unique entertainment experiences and brand events for a wide variety of clients around the world. And we will link his services in it down below. Try him out. So, Patrick, now about Infinite, can you let us know about how did you come up with that name for your company? And tell us about unique entertainment and brand events and what kind of clients and how far around the world that you deal with them.
Sure. So I had been in this industry for a while, working for other companies, of course, and started off, believe it or not, more in television and in movies back in the 90s. And then moving forward, I left that company and I worked with another company um, doing more sets. And then we started getting into production, et cetera. So basically, at the end of it, when I came out and I wanted my own company, and people were asking, well, what do you do? And kept saying, well, I do this, this, and this. It kind of became like an infinite set of abilities to be able to offer to people through the people that I work with. So that's how we came up with Infinite. Um, we have worked through all sorts of different things. So movies as large as like the Titanic. We used to work on old television shows. If everybody remembers, there was Due South about the Mountie that went down to Chicago, and there was a bunch of kid shows. Getting near the end of the 90s, and we moved through, we did movies like we worked on Titanic, Murder at 1600, That Old Feeling, Woo,
Love that
a
movie.
bunch of
Murder
others.
1600 was my favorite movie with
Yeah,
Wesley
that was a
Snipes.
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And
Um,
yeah, and Alan Alda as well. We love him.
yeah, that's right. And we actually we remade the Oval Office. There had been one that we had worked on a movie years before called Elvis Meets Nixon, which was based on a true story of when Elvis Presley actually got to meet Richard Nixon, and we did this little cable show for it. I think it was on Showcase or something like that at the
Wow.
time. But they had made an interior of the Oval Office, and it was one of the few that was still left in North America that hadn't been trashed. So they came and shot up in Toronto, and they did that show. And because they had that still in hand, they repurposed it yet again for Murder at 1600. So yeah, we did a lot of stuff like that, TV and movies. And then near the end of the 90s, the Ontario tax film credit kind of disappeared. There was a
Oh,
very large tax film credit that really drew a lot of people up, and this is when Hollywood North and all of this, and this is kind of before Vancouver really blew up. So at the end of the 90s, when Ontario decided to step away from this for some reason, Quebec, Montreal area, and then going into BC and all the greater Vancouver area just got a disproportionate amount of this traffic of film and television go to them. And it was a
wow.
little bit barren for about 10 years. So we kind of segued over and started working with corporate. So we ended up working with banks, pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, telephone companies, car companies, etc. And from that and working with all of those, we started doing these incentive conferences. So you're saying, where have you been? Pacific Rim, all across Canada, the States, Caribbean, through Europe. Lucky enough to go to places like Monaco and Montreux, Switzerland, and to Paris, and all the major cities in the States, et cetera, which was a lot of fun. Um, and then from working with those companies in that aspect, we started to grow our production into doing a lot more. um, building larger sets and just working through larger sort of events that became a lot bigger and started to get a bit more of what they will call optics, where other people were aware of it. So right around the end of the 2000s, and I know I'm jumping ahead by decades, et cetera, but just to kind of wrap it up, by the end of the 2000s, we had an opportunity to work with another large team. So we had the builders Ellis Dawn, and we worked with this company called Muesli out of Switzerland that does these large temporary sites, the Lord Cultural out of Toronto, which does a lot of the sort of thematic ideation for museums, et cetera. And we came in to do the production for what was going to be called Ontario House at the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver. So once we had that opportunity, that really blew things up for us. It was a really an amazing opportunity. And I think over the 18 days, we had 20 something bands. We had,
Wow.
we had cooking celebrities like chefs, et cetera. We had other celebrities come in. Wayne Gretzky came in for his wine, and then Mike Weir came in for his, et cetera.
Did you have Gordon Ramsay on at all?
Not Gordon Ramsay. The idea again was to try and highlight Ontario. So it was Anna Olson, Mike Olson. It was a lot of the chefs that are based out of Ontario region. The Cordon Bleu chefs out of Ottawa,
Okay.
that sort of thing. And then that segued. We had an opportunity from there to start doing some music festivals. Again, once your name, it's a very small industry. It's a big industry, but it's a small industry.
Wow.
And once things start to occur and your name's out there for a bit, people reach out, and our industry is you're only as good as your last show. So you take everything. It almost kills you. Our saying used to be, and still is really, you work every day that ends in day, and your days are 30 hours long because they just blur, like you just go to get the show done. Yeah, it can be kind of crazy. So we got a chance to do the 2010 or the 2015 Pan Am Games. We ended up doing 4 or 5 years of the Greenbelt Harvest Picnic out in Dundas, Ontario, which was wonderful to do. Just recently, we ended up doing this event for a company called Tirgan, which was for Iran, and it was at Scotiabank Arena, and we did the full production. I think we had about 20 something artists and 15 speakers and politicians from around the world, actually, and it was a massive event. Filled the Scotiabank Arena for us, and we had almost 30 million viewers worldwide, actually, for this. So it's been a really interesting opportunity. And when people ask how did you get from where you started to here, it just, you kind of keep going forward. There was absolutely no formula whatsoever.
Who do you think was your favorite celebrity to work with?
Well, I enjoyed working with Gord Downey because Gord was always just such a gentleman and a super cool guy. Daniel Lanois. Daniel is is a really good guy. He's an interesting individual, but he's a kind man. He gets upset sometimes, but on the whole, he's a really great guy. Really nice to be able to work with Daryl DMC, Daryl McDaniel from Run DMC.
Yeah.
So he's kind of become a good acquaintance, and we've worked on a few projects together, et cetera. And so that's been very cool. Emmylou Harris, because I do love her music as well, and she's just such a graceful lady. It was a lot of fun to meet her. And then a lot of the young bands coming up, starting out, like, is always been a lot of fun to work with them right when they're starting and they're nervous and they're getting on stage and they have all of this energy, and then you meet them a few years later and they've been touring for a bit and they're a little bit more aware of what needs to go on, and you see them and they just look more comfortable, and then you see them a few years later after that and they can be sometimes a bit hardened, but then they'll see you and they're like, oh yeah, okay, someone I recognize at least. So all of those things are always fun to do.
You say Run DMC is an acquaintance of yours, and Emmylou Harris, and stuff, and people who you see them years down the line.
Right.
And it's sort of like, if they're busy and they can't communicate with you, that's fine. But what about how many people do you employ? And what is your job?
So it's an interesting thing. So basically, what I do is I'm a producer. I'll come in and I'll produce an event, whatever that may be. And again, as I said, it can be music, it can be television, it can be a corporate event. It all depends on what's being launched and what the client is looking for. So we do the production, and a lot of what that is finding out, what are they looking for? What are they looking to do? So if it's a concert for a single band with an opener, pretty simple. If it's a festival that has some form of a theme to it, like the Greenbelt Harvest Picnic was all about supporting the Greenbelt and the Niagara Escarpment and a lot of farm to table and all of that sort of thing. So when we designed that outside, we were looking at renewable. We offered water stations for free. There was a lot of different things that occurred within the whole production, not just the music, that we had to take part in to kind of give it a proper vibe, like so somebody could sort of label it and tag it what that thing may have been.
Wow.
So on the amount of people that work with me, I'm basically like an entity that would get parachuted in. So it's myself and my wife that run the company. But on any given day, I've got a show coming up. We have this Donner Book Prize coming up on Thursday. I've got like a dozen people working with me on that show. When we were doing this past concert at Scotiabank Arena on March 25th, well, including the IATSE crew and everybody, I think we were like 135 people. So it really does vary in size, but it's not a four-wall office where we have people sitting at a desk and waiting for the next call to come in. If something goes down, we've been lucky enough to meet a lot of people in the industry that we can turn around and we can find the right person for that, and that's quality and price wise. So sometimes you need a really excellent lighting designer, or you need a really excellent video engineer, or a really excellent audio engineer. Sometimes you need one that's good. So whatever you're working with, you bring those sorts of people in, and obviously any support that they need, and that's really how we've structured this business to be able to move forward. And it's helped us to be a little bit more lithe, because since COVID, for instance, I bet you the industry in Toronto, I bet you we lost 30 or 40% of businesses because of COVID, because it was live. That one thing that didn't occur at all was live events. I mean, construction occurred, and then television and films, because they needed some sort of content. My daughter, actually, she's 24. She's a camera now, and she works in TV and film. So while I was sitting home, she was busy working, which kind of pissed me off a bit. But the beauty of that, kind of seeing it from before, because we went through this in the late 90s, and then we went through it in the late 2000s, like right around 2008, was we wanted to make sure that we didn't get into trouble financially by getting too big and waiting for something to occur. And it's helped us a lot, because I've worked with great companies and great individuals to be able to get the shows done.
So let's say you have a multi-instrumentalist and you're hiring him, and then he calls you the day and said, I can't make it today. Do you have a backup that can just be parachuted in, as you say, immediately?
No, if it's a multi-instrumentalist, like an actual like talent that's going to be on stage, they've been promoted. That's where you get into a lot of the legal contractual issues, that working with the agents and all of that sort of situation. And there's insurance that's built in there. So if an act can't come onto stage for that date, which we had actually with Neil Young one year, Neil Young and Crazy Horse were going to come and play at a concert for us, an outdoor festival, obviously the headliner. And the bass player got injured about a month beforehand, or 3 weeks beforehand.
Oh, wow.
So Neil Young's like, no, that's my crew. I'm not going to bring in, we're not subbing anybody in. If it's not Crazy Horse, it's not going to be anybody. And so at that time, it was a festival. We actually had to inform people that he wasn't coming. People were clamoring at that time actually for ticket refunds, but we couldn't, because it was a festival with everyone in there. Neil's wife at the time was playing as well earlier in the day. So we were hoping that maybe Neil would come up and just do a little solo gig. He did come up, and we tried to talk him into it, and he's like, I can't, because as soon as I perform, the insurance becomes null and void, and then I'm liable for the fee that you guys are claiming back. And it was,
Seriously?
yeah, it was a 7-figure fee. So he couldn't perform. The audience was a little bit upset, and there's nothing you can do about it. So something smaller, like let's say it was a corporate gig and it was just entertainment at dinner or after dinner, and you're saying a multi-instrumentalist and bringing someone in, we might try to do something with that. But that's because they're more of a cog in a machine. Like that's just music on stage. It's not a recognized name. Recognized name, if they are unable to play, the show doesn't go on.
I never heard of this insurance, and as soon as I go up on my own, this insurance is null and void. What?
Oh
That's the
yeah.
first time I heard of that. Is that just for him, or is that for anyone like Steve Tyler? And
It would be for anyone. So the whole idea
wow,
again is that he was going to come in as Neil Young and Crazy Horse. We were arguing and talking to say, well, if this is just Neil Young and it's a solo, what could we do about that? And it didn't
wow.
matter. The name was a big enough draw. As soon as he performed, then the insurance became null and void, and it just turned into a whole situation. And the difficulty with this, I mean, it's not that difficult. I think everyone's aware these days. All of this entertainment, whether it's music or acting, film, TV, any of those things, is solely a business. And so once it becomes a business, it's lawyers and accountants, and everybody's excited about X, Y, and Z. But in reality, what we find out is 90% of what occurs before they get down there is your work. For instance, if you have a concert, so we have a concert, we have an outdoor festival occurring in July. We start working on that probably in September the year before.
Really?
We're looking at booking acts probably October, November, December, because that next summer is festival season. So they may
Wow.
get booked somewhere else. And then there's these what are called radius clauses. So I'm booking them and I happen to be 80 kilometers outside of Toronto. But they signed before they signed with us, they signed to do a gig in Toronto. And that venue, whatever it may be, it could be something like the Bud Stage, it could be something smaller. If they put in something like 100-kilometer radius clause in there, that means that oftentimes that artist can't play for a month before or a month after they're performing at that venue in Toronto. So that would affect us. So that's why you try to book as early as possible, because the artist will get booked for, especially if they're dropping an album or anything like that, or they're just super hot, they'll be booked for the next year before that year occurs. Most people for 2023 were pretty much 70% booked by the end of 22. And then you work through the production and all of that fun stuff.
Well, that last concert Gordon Downey did before he died of his brain tumor, what sort of insurance was on that, since because he's on stage and he might die on the stage because of that? And what was going on there? Do you have any clue what happened?
Well, usually what would happen was something like that. Now, when he did that, that happened fairly quickly, just because Gord was aware that he was only going to have so much time. But Live Nation basically came in and kind of underwrote that for them. So that large concerts, and that wasn't a super large concert, but it was large, let's say, for the emotional impact it had on people in Canada. There would be an insurance on that for the show. So because it was a tour, every city that he hit, there would be an insurance marker. And once that was done, it would change. But if he didn't, for whatever reason, if he was weak enough that he didn't make it to Kingston to that last concert, then there would have been an insurance put in there. Not so much with this, because if it's underwritten by a production company, let's say like a Live Nation, they're taking that liability on course. And as anybody's seen with Ticketmaster, Live Nation, when you buy a ticket, they hold that money, just so you know. The artist doesn't get that money until after the show goes. So all of those ticket sales are being held. So if the event did not occur in Kingston, it's easy enough for them to be able to let all of the audience recoup their money, because they've been holding it basically in escrow until the concert goes down, and then they can send it back. On the other side of that coin, because I've had a couple of times where I've been foolish enough to underwrite some small tours across Canada. If you're dealing with somebody like a StubHub or a Ticketmaster or any of these companies, if you're looking at part of your output, like part of your cost for that city to be from these sales, you're in trouble because you won't see the money until after the show. So you need to have, if you're going to do an 8 or a 10 city tour, you've got to make sure that you have the money to cover every single city moving forward, because you won't see any of that money until the show's over and everything else has been paid. So all of the front of house staff, the electricity, um, any sort of cost that's entailed with that, tickets, etc., and then you'll get your money out of that. So it's a tough business right now, especially, and you'll see people are going to see names. And what we used to have in the 80s and the 90s were all these small bands, all these great small clubs, and we could go out, $5 at the door, we'd see somebody, and the next thing they made something of themselves. I mean, Bare Naked Ladies used to just hump up and down Queen Street. Arkells, I mean, we had Arkells come on board 2010 for the Winter Olympics, and right before that in 2009 we had an event in Hamilton, the Hamilton Music Awards. They were young and ready, and they were gamers and ready to do all of that. And I do think that the reason that Hamilton that does have some great young talent that's coming out of there is because they've got such a good club scene for live music. And I think Toronto, unfortunately, because Toronto is growing and growing, the club scene for live music has gotten smaller and smaller, and it's tough to develop talent if they can't go out there and screw up and get in trouble and have, pardon my French, shitty nights and good nights, and really start to cull their craft, right? Just to be able to become good at what they're doing. And that's something that I find is unfortunate these days.
I think you're right, Patrick, because I notice, talk to a lot of musicians. They say that not only is it you can't make money off music anymore, but sometimes you have big musicians and people that you used to see on the stage working at regular jobs.
Oh, yeah.
Because they can't make any money doing music anymore, or they just suddenly quit their band, whatever. But you get new talent. Like, can you explain to me why the whole Taylor Swift concert, why they were demanding like $4,000 or $5,000 for her concert? Why aren't the musicians themselves contacted, let them know, listen, you're not going to get people at your concert because Ticketmaster or something is going to be paying, like, how much are your tickets? Oh, they're like 800. Well, how come this person's being charged 5,000 to sit in the balcony?
Yeah.
Like, how do you deal with something like that?
Well, that's another new difficulty that's coming up, and a lot of that has to do with sort of levels of monetization. So Taylor Swift going out to do a tour is like U2 going out to do a tour. That's being underwritten by Live Nation. So Live Nation will come to these large artists and go, all right, you're going to put this tour together. What do you need? So very intricate, large sets, tons of video. There's the elevated stages, there's the wire. So all of that is being built beforehand, all the rehearsal time. Oftentimes, these bands will rehearse for 2, 3, 4 months before they go out on a tour, right? And so that's all being paid for by somebody at the time. Live Nation has come out and said, okay, we'll put these millions of dollars into this to get things moving. Live Nation acquired Ticketmaster, so they own Ticketmaster, and then they went and got a secondary reseller. So what has been happening is when you see Taylor Swift on sale, those tickets, and it's a venue like, let's say, a Scotiabank Arena, so approximately 15,000 people full, like if you take the stage into consideration, there may be 5,000 tickets available. American Express has their front of the line, they'll take a couple of thousand. Then there'll be about 5,000 for general audience. The rest of those tickets, what happens is that Ticketmaster will basically absorb them and actually sell them to this secondary reseller, and then they're bumping it up and reselling it. So I think, unfortunately, it always comes down to the States. It'll be some sort of a regulatory body and the state's coming in and seeing, this is monopolization that's occurring right now, because it's like a Ponzi. All they're doing is they're building up the same thing, and it's just air. It's not like 14 or 15 people have bid on this. They put it up for sale. Nobody else could see it. They went and purchased it, and they've bumped it up, and now they're selling it out maybe at 2 or 3 or 4 different sort of digital locations for people to get it. And, I mean, Springsteen, the same thing. Wasn't Springsteen like 3,000 or 4,000 a ticket at one point?
Probably.
Yeah, I think it was just a couple months back, and that's the difficulty, with any of those things. I mean, honestly, if you find out there's a good band, take a look at some of these smaller towns. Take a look at a Barrie or a Guelph or something outside of town where they're hitting maybe a smaller market. You probably can get a ticket for 20, 30, 40 bucks and go see them in a venue that's maybe a 500 seater or a 300 seater and have a really, really good show.
So I take it when a musician or a band performs, they're not the first people that get paid then. When you're talking about you have to pay for the electricity, you have to pay for the people. Would Taylor Swift, would they hand her the check, here's the amount you made for tour, and then pay the electricity and all the other people, or do they go first?
So with a tour, every venue would have to get paid first. So you would have the venue payment. So again, let's do a really quick, for instance, and please don't quote me on the numbers, but I'm going to do big round numbers, let's say. So Scotiabank Arena, you're renting that, there's a $40,000 rental fee. Then you have all of the front house staff. So these are the people that are, greeting you when you come in the door, that are at the merch tables, that are doing all sorts of crowd direction. Then you get inside where the seats are, and you have, again, all the front of house people getting you to your seats. You've got security. Maybe you have police there. All of those have to be paid, and they get paid before the artist does. When they have merch that goes out, the venue takes a percentage of it, and the rest goes back to the artist. So that gets paid out. What usually happens is that there's a guarantee for a larger audience, for a larger artist, there will be a guaranteed amount, and then the gate after that. So that if it's a production that's properly managed, the budget is properly managed, they'll end up making more than what they've been promised. But all of those costs have to come into consideration. I think it was 2018 or 2019. Could have been 2020, but I think it was Bieber came out with something and it just wasn't moving. He wasn't doing well at the time. And they started off at outdoor stadiums. Sales didn't work. Like within 3 weeks, they came to indoor stadiums. So like hockey rinks. And then from there, they actually tailored it down to, I think they ended up doing about a third of the concerts, because again, the accountants are watching everything that goes, and they know the trends. It's almost like McDonald's knows how many burgers are going to go out per hour. They know the trends on sales and all of the proper, the larger urban centers that they want to hit. So, if they're going to come into North America, they want to make sure they got LA, Chicago, New York. They probably want to get down to Orlando, Dallas, any of those larger centers. But then they know in between what they're going to be able to hit. So they know that going, let's say, from Chicago to New York, they're going to hit some stuff in Ohio, upper New York State, maybe into Pennsylvania on their way. If they see that that's not trending, then they get scared, because they don't like the idea of having sales at the door. They almost want to be sold out or down to like maybe 10% of the tickets being available by the day of show. So they'll just cut that stuff back. And now what we're seeing is it's large shows. You get the Foo Fighters will go out, fantastic. You'll get these other bands that go out, fantastic. But, it's keeping your eye out for, again, Arkells coming back, or a Monster Truck coming back, or some of these other bands that are well-known Canadian bands, but really, and they have a following. They do well in Europe, on tour. They do well in the States on tour, but it's still very much club, college scene. Again, a great place to be able to see them play. And then they come back to, Canada, and now they're playing back at Scotiabank Arena again. it's kind of the formula that the Hip did for a number of years, right? The Hip were huge in Canada, but you would be able to go and hit a club in New York City, and you and like 100 other people would be in there watching the Hip playing. It was fantastic.
Yeah. So in case of Tragically Hip, now that Gord Downie is now passed on, they can't really continue as a group then, eh?
I mean, anybody can do what they wish, but I doubt they ever would. I mean, that connection with Gord and with the band, I think, is just so close and so tight. It's almost like Zeppelin after they lost Bonham. I don't see that. I don't have that inside information, but my perception and from what I've known would be that won't happen again. They might do a pop up once in a while, maybe, but I think that's said and done.
Yeah, there are people who totally loved Chicago when Terry Kath was lead singer, but when he died and Peter Cetera replaced him, they were like, I'm not listening to Chicago anymore. But I found out Chicago, Peter Cetera was already lead singer. I not only
Yeah.
followed his solo work, but I still followed Chicago. Now that he left the band, I still like maybe a few of the new songs that the new Chicago with the new singer have, but it's not the same. So
Yeah.
that's why a lot of people, when Terry Kath passed away, that they decided, okay, I'm not going to listen to Chicago. It goes like that. But I mean, I wouldn't specifically go see Chicago in a concert unless Peter Cetera came with it. You
Well,
know,
and those are the interesting things. Like right now, U2 is going to be playing in Vegas. They're going to do a residency in Vegas to support. I believe it's to support that Surrender, that book that Bono wrote. But Larry Mullen Jr. hurt his wrist, so he's not playing drums. So U2 is going to be playing in a residency for a month, and Larry Mullen Jr. is not going to be the drummer. And personally, I'm a big U2 fan. I won't go. I won't go see it without Larry Mullen Jr. Like,
but then
from
Bono decides to still play with his band, but Neil Young doesn't because of Crazy Horse, one of the guys. Like, really?
well, they
Wow.
did this before. Well, but they made this announcement beforehand, so it wasn't like Larry was going to be there. As soon as they made the announcement, they also did discuss that he wasn't going to be playing at all, and that they were going to have guest drummers coming in, to fill that position. So, at least they were upfront about it. But these things happen, and the same idea is the argument. If you could spend an afternoon with a whole bunch of people about Sabbath, right? Ronnie James Dio or our friend. So
Yeah.
it it's it's what people want and like and do. But I think with the Hip, I don't see that coming back. No, unfortunately, they did a fantastic job though. They're a fantastic band, really good people. But I don't see them coming back. No, no.
So, what about when mentions that you did theater and corporate industry? Did you ever do any um, ones for Apple or Microsoft?
Um, I think we did something for Microsoft. Used to do a fair amount for Shopify. Uh, when Shopify was really growing, they grew like exponentially. A lot of banks, a lot of pharmaceutical companies, um, and then phone companies. I did a lot of stuff with Motorola for a number of years,
Hmm.
and then we came in and did a bunch of stuff with Ericsson before they left, and they just have a lot of their
Oh,
platforms. So Ericsson does a lot of software. They've got um, probably some of the best end-to-end encryption for software right now. They built this amazing facility in Quebec. Um, Basically, for lack of a better word, you could call it a cloud storage, a server farm.
hmm.
But it's a server farm that is so highly secure that um, governments and Fortune 500 companies use them to be able to protect their information.
And does it work?
I guess so. We haven't heard anything bad so far. But see, they got out of phones, which was an interesting thing because the phone industry got so competitive. Same idea with BlackBerry. We used to do a lot of stuff with BlackBerry. BlackBerry still exists, but again, they're doing a lot of the software now, and they're not really doing that. They got away from the tactile telephone idea, but again, their security is amazing stuff. But we did a lot with like GlaxoSmithKline, a lot of pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, Great West Life, Canada Life, London Life, a lot of that sort of thing. Cars, we did a lot of work with Nissan, BMW, Acura, all of those sorts of companies, which was a lot of fun to do. All through the States too. We did a lot in Canada, but a lot of times when they had a new vehicle and they were going to launch it within the industry, so they would have the dealers all come down, like an incentivized, and it would be the top dealers come in. So it was huge. They would spend big money, and we'd have massive events. We'd have the cars on turntables. We actually had like these waterfall video screens. So you'd have the vehicle on a turntable. Before anybody came in, this actual water wall comes down like a waterfall. Wow. And we would hit it with a projector, and that's all you would see. And that would be the opening. And it would look kind of like a Super 8 because of the water. Nice. And we entailed it with dancers and water and rain. And then as soon as it stopped, the vehicle was there on a turntable, and all those sorts of fun little things that we used to do. So there were some engineering challenges and things like that, but it was fun, and it has been fun, and everyone seems to be different. Like every time we seem to do something, there's a new challenge and something different, which has been good for doing it for 30 years to not get bored, I suppose.
Yeah, it says that you have hands-on and everything. Is there anything that you has hands-off?
Yeah, I mean, I don't write code. I don't do any of the technical aspect per se. I've got enough information and enough knowledge to be dangerous, but I hire the right people to do that. But I did start off, actually, I was a suit. I was in sales for my 20s, and then I couldn't really handle it anymore. I was making good money and stuff, but the industry, the people, it was very backstabby. It was very Glengarry, Glen Ross sort of thing. Yeah. And I didn't enjoy it, and I walked away, and I stumbled upon this. And so when I started off, it was all set and scene. I actually learned how to sew at 29 years old. And one of the, I was making sandbags for TV and movies. And then we started making large backdrops and scenes and stuff. And then
wow,
probably one of the first big ones we did was, for Titanic, all of the submarine scenes that were in Halifax, we had to build 80-foot high blackout drape for this huge shipbuilding warehouse that they were using for the submarine scenes.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, the stuff was so big, they had to bring transport trucks to take it. And we were sitting out in a parking lot, sewing the stuff because it was so long, and then dragging it out. And it was like really thick stuff. Each unit, I believe, was 80 feet high and 30 feet wide and weighed like a couple of 100 pounds. And so that was how we learned the trade, was actually making sets, soft sets. And then we started getting into the carp side and making it, and just kept my eyes open. And I was watching how, important lighting was. And then the set and the scenic, it's like, oh, this could be a good palette. Why is everything black? Why don't we bring it in lighter? And then if they light it, now they've got a huge canvas that they can color. And the lighting guys used to love that. And then we would move further and talk about how do we bring talent and incorporate that in. And that got us into the production side of things. So working with, as you say, hands-on working with the people, but I bring in the people that have the skill set. So I always bring in great lighting designers, audio engineers, video engineers, any of the people that have that technical knowledge and that do that day in, day out, I rely on. I would never even hazard doing that. I'd rather be the conductor to make sure that all the parts and pieces are actually falling into place.
Do you have them on speed dial? Like you say, you have all these people in mind, but do you have, in case one can't make it, like I said before, do you have more than one?
Absolutely, 100%. Oh yeah, yeah, multiple. Yeah, there's no doubt about that, because people are busy, right? So that's also when we learn about events, we reach out as early as we can to book the people that we want. So, right now we're booking things for October and November already, and getting our teams together for that. We've got, show in June, that's already fully booked up. We've got one in July we're just trying to get put together, which is going to be a festival with a broadcast that's going out. And so working with all those different teams. So again, something like that, when you're doing a live broadcast out, so it goes to live TV, and this happens to be going out to the world. You bring in somebody like a Dome Productions. So you've seen the Dome trucks. I'm sure everyone has the white with the green at like a baseball game, hockey game, basketball game. They're pretty much that broadcast truck that has all of that technological aspect into, like, I'm sure they're almost $1 million, if not more, those trucks.
Yeah.
They're pretty amazing. So coordinating and bringing all of that in as well. So there's always these parts and pieces, depending on the size of the show, that you need to be aware of and integrate. And if you're up and you've done this long enough, all the holes that need to be filled, and it is finding the right people and having them do their job, and then coming back to you and keeping that one sole source of communication moving forward from everyone, but letting them do what they need to do and not interfering. And that's really why we've had a lot of success, because everybody that's good in anything, I don't care what you do, hate to have somebody hovering or telling them or managing them in any way, shape, or form. So if you let them do what they do, they usually appreciate it and do an amazing job.
Well, when you hire somebody, did you have to check the resume, find out what kind of work they did, talk to the people they did work for, see how they are before you said, okay, you're on?
Well, it's interesting. It's very much it's almost like an old school industry to some degree with that. And what I mean is that most of us that have worked together with everyone for a long time kind of got apprenticed into this. They showed up, we were used and abused, and who lasted? There's a lot of people that couldn't make it through one day. A lot of people couldn't make it through a week. A lot of people that couldn't make it for a month, etc. So you work together and you move up, and people see a skill set and go, okay, that person's reliable, we'll call them back. That person's reliable and their skill set is improving, I definitely want to call them back. And that's how it grew. In this day and age, a lot of the, let's say, the younger crew, the younger technicians that come on board have gone to school. They get vetted by the AV company or whomever that we would be hiring, that we've known for years. And, we've got an expectation of skill set. And so they'll turn around and go, oh, so-and-so is coming on board. Well, who are they? I've not worked with them before. They're excellent. They've worked on this. I give you my word. Well, they're giving me their word, and I've known them for a number of years. So this new person comes on board. We keep an eye on them. If they do well, we'll request them again in the future. But it's not like going to any sort of a headhunter per se to find someone, or, oh, do they have their masters in X, Y, and Z? A lot of the people that I've worked with in the past, they have their PhD in street. They learned it hands on, really and truly. Some of the people that, the skill sets where they got better, let's say at video engineering or lighting design, etc., they may have gone and gotten further education as time has gone by. But oftentimes what happened were they were the people that were working. So let's say in the 90s, when lighting started to go from incandescent into LED, and that gave a greater adaptability on cost-wise for, let's say, a fixture, but color changing, etc. That opened a whole new door. That also brought in new boards. So lighting boards, which were, like a computer, they would grow and grow with their capabilities. But the lighting companies, the people that made the boards and the people that made the fixtures, wanted the lighting people to use their product. So they would have, there's all sorts of conventions, Orlando, Vegas, etc. They'll fly specific people down there, and they will go through a full training of this new product. So they come back and go, oh my God, this board, we have to buy it. And that board could be $100,000 board, right? Or these light fixtures, we need them. But to buy that inventory, you're saying, oh, I'm willing to drop $250,000 to add this inventory. Same thing with when video started to really, go from tape to digital format, and then the expansion into, 1080 and then into 4K, and all of those just the way the evolution of all of this has occurred. The young kids are learning this in school. The older ones are learning it basically hands-on by most of the people that manufacture these goods, because they want
Wow.
them to use their product. And so there's that changeover that's coming, where a lot of that sort of old school that learned on the job are handing off now to university educated people, and going through that sort of regrouping, I guess is the right word. The one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of the people that have this new education are really good at what they do, but they're very much in that silo. So if they're really, really good at, let's say, working in specifics in video, they specialize in that now. If they're really good at this, they kind of specialize in that. And their social skills, and I don't want to say all of them because it's not very fair, but they're quieter. They're not, this industry is a very loud, very tear you down industry. If you can't take it, you wouldn't last very long. And it's way better than it used to be. It used to be awful. I mean, awful, like awful in every sense of the way. Bullying, homophobia, misogyny, all of that was awful. It was basically, when I first started in this industry, it was white guys. That was it. Very few females, very few people of color. There was always a lot of people that in the industry that were gay, but would not necessarily be open about it, but everybody knew, because the entertainment industry, for I think ever, has always had a little bit more of an open idea because of the creativity and the art form of it. As time has gone by, now it's so open. It's not even an issue. But the last 10 years, I would say, female and people of color is really started to grow. I don't think it's where it needs to be yet, but it certainly is a lot better than it was back in the late 80s and early 90s, that's for sure.
Wow. That's amazing. So what about the logistics? Now, you find it harder for budget constraints, mitigated risk, developing solutions. What do you think is the most hardest, the budgets or the risk? What would you say when you first take on a job? How much money do you have that you can pay, or how we're going to do this, make sure it works right? What is the first thing that you think of that once it's out of the way, everything else comes natural?
The client's vision. The first thing is the client's vision. Somebody can come up to you and say, I want to do this little gag. I want it to be like 310 to Yuma idea, where it's a little bit of a cowboy gag at the start of a show, and I want to do this thing, and they just leave it with you. And so somebody's going to turn around and maybe literally take all of those parts and pieces, whereas the person that threw that out saw it walking by and doesn't even really like the show and was just thinking, oh, I just mean cowboys and guns. So the biggest thing is to find out what the vision is, because sometimes we'll hear a word and somebody will come running back and go, okay, they want this, this, and this. I heard yellow and bright. And so they're turning this into some sort of a children's show. And that's not at all what was being discussed. So they get the vision. We understand what they're looking for. Right away after that, then you start to talk budget. If you're not talking budget, then you're actually talking the story, the creative aspect of it. From the creative aspect of it, then you'd land on what they want. And then it's basically, okay, then we're looking at this kind of money. And if they're like, oh, we don't have that, then tell me what you want. Really, one of the first asks of anybody is, what's your budget? And almost 100% of the time, they'll say, we don't know.
Oh, wow.
So, you're starting from zero. Now, where is it? Where's it happening? Is it in a small ballroom? Like, oh, it's at the Sheridan Center in this ballroom. It's like, okay, well, it's a smaller place. There's maybe 300 people going to be there. So you start to have a bit of an understanding of what they can do in there. So you're like, okay, they're looking at probably, a $30,000 to $50,000 budget for this event, sort of thing. And then you start to work in from that range. Risk and mitigating risk, the larger an event is, the more detail that goes into it. Risk and the mitigation thereof is, how do you put it? it's that hole that gets eaten in your stomach. You never forget about it. You think about it all the time until the show is done. It's just one of those things that's always there, thinking about what could happen, what could happen, what could happen. So it's always good to be aware of that. And what we do is we look at an A, B, C, and sometimes D scenario. So if the risk happens to be, let's say during the Olympics, what if there's a bomb threat? What are we going to do? Right? So then we have to take a look at how do we get everybody into a safe place? How do we disperse people as safely as possible? How do we get messaging out to whomever the security or the police forces are? And then what do we do next? And so you have to take a look at all of those things. And when we were doing something like that for the Olympics, it was even looking at 3 different escape routes to get off of the actual venue, property. So again, everything has its own sort of story to it as you move forward. But as I say, budget is big, but budget you rarely hear. For me, my first question usually is, what is your vision? I want to know what they want to see, and then we can work from there. And then we, there's a saying that we have that we use oftentimes if they don't have much of a budget, but we know what they want to do, and it's called trickery and deception, because everything is just it's a trick of the mind. Like, people look at something like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And you're like, yeah, that's a bunch of plastic that's been wrapped up, and we put it way back there and we threw some light on it. So you think it's some really fantastic lighting effect, and it's not, So you try and give them what they can, for their budget. But it's really, as soon as you talk to somebody about what their vision is and what they want, it's easy then to start talking about money. It's easy then to start talking about how to get there, because you're listening to them now and you're trying to give them what they want. And now the shoe's on their foot on how do we get to there.
Do they have to pay you up front, or do they pay you in the end? And how about you? When do you get paid?
Well, took years of learning that. we've when we start a project, we look for a 50% deposit up front.
Oh, okay.
And then as we work through the project, depending on the size of it and what we're doing and how many stages there may be some payment moving forward. I mean, we've had some things that, let's say it's a year out, it might be a 15% deposit up front. And then in 3 months, another 10 to get us to the 25. And then 3 months from there, another 25 to bring us to the 50.
Wow.
And you keep going in chunks, because we also have to pay. In many ways, we're a gatekeeper for the client and their facilitator. We'll have an AV company that we have to hire. Sometimes, with talent, now we're looking at the talent agency and bringing the talent in and looking at their riders. So, for instance, if you get a band in, the Glorious Sons, 2015 for the Pan Am Games, we had the Glorious Sons come and play. So the Glorious Sons were X dollars. Let's say I won't say how much they were, but let's say they were $1,000. They were much more than that, but just to give you an idea. So they're like, oh, wow, they're $1,000. But they're not $1,000, because you have to get them to the venue. You have to put them up in hotels. You have to have ground transport to get them from the hotel to the venue. Then they're going to have what's called a hospitality rider, which will touch on food, drink, all of those sorts of things that they're looking for. And then they also have a technical rider. And the technical rider are things like their backline, like instruments, etc. So oftentimes they will travel with their own, let's say, guitar, bass. The drummer will probably come with his throne maybe, but he'll probably bring his sticks and what we call breakables, like things that they can break down. So, their cymbals and etc. But you're getting the drum kit. You're bringing all the amps in. So the big bass amp and the head, the guitar amps, all of that, all of the wedge monitors, the different type of microphones that they want specifically. So you have to deal with all of that. So that $1,000 now could end up being more like $4,000 or $5,000. So if you're paying a band, for instance, $20,000, at the end of it, it may be actually $35,000 or $45,000 as your actual cost for the band to play at your venue, because of all of these other things that need to be addressed.
Well, but they may not even end up with $40,000. They may end up with less than that, no? Because they have to pay their band members as well.
Well, no. So when I say that, that's the cost that I have to output. The band
Oh,
already,
okay.
the agent came up and the agent said, "You want band XYZ? They're $20,000." So you sign an agreement for that. You go through the contract. You basically put a 50% deposit in escrow that's being held by the agency in escrow, that is being held for the band. Band doesn't see any of that money. The band comes and performs. At the end of the performance, I will have a money order, bank draft, that I give to them for the balance of the show, that I hand to them in their hand. The one that's been in escrow for 3 months or 6 months, they will be getting from the agency after the show is complete.
Wow. That's a long time to wait for money. Wow.
But if they're on the road and once it gets going, then every week, if they're doing 2 or 3 shows a week, every week they're getting 2 or 3 paychecks, right? Um, and that's the way that sort of works. And then the larger crews, so these are the ones where I'm bringing them in, so I'm also paying for the whole stage crew, so all of the stage hands, the stage manager, um, the monitor engineer, the audio engineer, all of those people we're paying for. If they go on the road, oftentimes they'll have a tour manager, their own audio engineer. Some of them will have even some of their own stage hands. Some of them will have their own techs, like guitar tech, bass tech, drum tech, that'll go out with them. Um, and those are the bands that are let's say, let's go in the middle. Let's say Blue Rodeo. Blue Rodeo is still out touring, does an amazing job. They play out kind of like what we call the OHL arenas. They'll play at
Good
London,
old Jim
they'll
Cuddy.
Barry, and all of those places. Well, they do extremely well, but they'll bring their team. They have their guitar techs, drum techs, tour manager. They'll have there'll be stage hands at every venue in there, but they will have their own stage manager, and they may have one stage lead that's there.
Oh, wow.
They'll bring their own audio engineer to do the mix at front of house. They'll bring their own monitor engineer to do the mix that they hear on stage.
Gee, really? Wow.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Because the expectation that they have of their music for their audience is that it has to be the best, and you don't want to rely on somebody you don't know, right? Going from town to town to town. So they travel as a team. I mean, the larger tours, when you see those really large tours down at at the Sky Dome or at Scotiabank Arena, and you'll see 3 or 4 or 5 buses. A lot of those buses are carrying crew. They're not really carrying the talent. That's the crew that's going from city to city to city on the bus. The talent oftentimes is hopping on a plane anymore.
So you said that you plan things a year in advance. Like, let's say Britney Spears is going on in tour next summer, 2024, and you said you have to start planning it now. So when do you and your wife get to take a week off of vacation? If you have to,
You pick certain times of the year. It very is an analog life. Like, there's peaks and valleys, and there's certain times of the year that are going to be a little bit quieter. So oftentimes will be like just before Christmas, it gets very quiet in the industry. Oftentimes the beginning of the summer, it gets quiet. It gets busy once you get into the meat of the summer. But
wow.
because really the world revolves around corporate and family, kids are getting out of school, corporate, are getting ready to go to their cottage or go on vacation. So things just start to get a little bit quieter while humans are doing their human thing and they don't need us. So that's when we take our time as well.
So that's interesting. Now I'm looking at all the movies and television that we discussed as well, but you did the Sweet Hereafter. Now that's my friend's favorite movie, and I know the story behind that and the school bus that kind of went into the water and everything. So what part did you have a hand in that?
So we did, if you remember, sort of the fairgrounds. There was
Mm-hmm.
all the string lighting at nighttime. So we did all the set for that
Nice.
scenario. So all that fairgrounds, all the set that was in there for that scene, we ended up doing. That was shot in multiple locations out in BC, and we dealt with that one location for that particular movie. Yeah.
Did it take long to string up those lights?
Yeah, everything's a couple of days. You get there the first day, you walk through, you take a look at the storyboard and see what the set designers got put together, and then you start working on it. And a lot of it is what we call pre-production. You want to walk and talk through things so that you do it once and you do it properly, as opposed to like, oh, I know what I'm doing, and you go throw it up and they're like, this isn't what we want, and you do it over and over again, because oftentimes something could get damaged and maybe there's only so much of that thing, whatever it may be. And time on the ground for a movie or TV show, when they're in shooting mode, okay, so they've got everybody on site. Now the talent could be in their RV, people could be over at craft services having a drink or having something to eat. Somebody may be working over with the auto pool or whatever, but there's something always going on. Everything is timed, because at whatever o'clock they want to do this shot. If you're not doing your job 8 hours before to be complete 4 hours before, that interferes with the person that's doing it 4 hours before, that needs to be done 2 hours before, etc. And once you start shooting, it ranges anywhere between $100,000 to $250,000 an hour is basically the cost.
Oh, wow.
On location to shoot something, with all of the people that are there, all the gear that is there, the insurance that you're paying, overtime that you're paying, like all of the parts and pieces that need to be put into place. That's the range you're looking at. So you need to know what you're doing beforehand, because you can't, if you waste money like that, you'll never come back. You'll never ever have a show again.
And then I'm looking at all these corporate events you did. These are multi-million or multi-billion-dollar companies.
Yes.
And one of them is Great West Life that's Great. Wait, what? Great West Life Assurance?
Yes.
Oh, I thought it was Great West Life Insurance. Okay.
No, it's Great West Life Assurance. Yeah. So
Oh.
Great West Life. So interesting thing. I worked for almost a decade with that whole umbrella. So it's the Desmarais family that owns Power Corp. Power Corp owns Great West Life, London Life, Canada Life, Mackenzie Financial, and CGI or whatever that one's called. I can't remember. It's another, again, investment firm. And so, they're all multi-billion-dollar companies, and we would basically do the productions for what they would call their incentive conferences. So these were their top earners that brought in their poorest clients would be millionaires, probably multi-millionaires. They're managing tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow.
And obviously with their success rate, the client is successful, so the client's happy. But with that success rate as well, is the company is happy. So, we would do things, and, we would fly them to Mexico, fly them to Hawaii, to Monaco, to Switzerland, all over the world. And then we would do these events. I mean, I had in Montreux, Switzerland, I booked a steamboat, and we were out on Lac Le Mans for a big party and took them to a castle one night. Another, we took them up to Gruyere, and we took them up actually on what was called the Chocolate Train, which was this old Belle Epoque train. Think of Murder on the Orient Express. I booked the whole train and had everybody go up there, and they meandered up and just drank and ate chocolate until they got to the top of the mountain. Then they had a big party up there, and then we brought them all back down. And then there's the events on the site, bands that you bring in, other talent like dancers and talent, etc. So there's always something going on from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. There's something going on, whether it's in a ballroom or it's a function outside or anything like that. And our job we usually be down for a month doing back-to-backs, and they would be there probably for 4 or 5 days, because we'd have to set up, get the show ready, do the show for those people, then kind of do a bit of a tear down and a reset. Next group people come in, we set that up, do the show for them again. They finish up, we tear down, load the trucks, the containers, maybe get 1 day off, and then we'd fly home.
Oh, wow.
And you just do that over and over and over again, sort of idea.
So I take it it's the company that pays you.
The company that pays us. Yes. Yeah.
That's interesting. So I noticed here you did Woodstock 99. Now that's like, how different was that from Woodstock 69?
It was, if you remember, this was the one where the big rain came, and then the rioting happened. There's the Chili Peppers got a little out of hand, and Limp Bizkit, and it turned into a really a nightmare. There was the fires and the rioting. I don't know, like, it's,
That's probably why they stopped having these Woodstocks, because
yeah, 20 something. Well, they went and did it in the wrong site too. They went and did it like on an old army base. It was all concrete. People were in a terrible, terrible mood. So we did
why not
all
just
of the
do it in the
set for
original
that.
Woodstock?
We did all the set for the large stage, all of the set pieces that covered all of the scaff. We came in and we made that and had that all installed. I think that was Rome, New York. I mean, I know it was called Woodstock, but I think that one happened to be in Rome, New York, back in '99.
That's amazing, my friend. Wow. Um, yeah, infinite. So how long do you think you can do this, my friend? You can retire at all anytime soon? You can think you're going to be 100 years old still doing these things? And who did I call the other day to come down and do electricity? Who? I can't remember.
Well, it's funny. If you like something, it doesn't really feel like a job. I probably get a little bit more particular in what I'm doing. So things that I look at and go, oh, that's too much of a pain in the ass. Or let's say I've worked with someone in the past and I've worked with them multiple times, but it's been a difficult relationship. I probably would get to a point where I'm like, I don't need that nonsense anymore. But on the other side of that coin, um, we've started doing now, as things are progressing, a little bit more live broadcasting, which is kind of cool. We've got another event coming up in July that we're going to be doing a 4-day live broadcast for.
That's
Um,
neat.
but one of my associates and I are actually talking about starting a production company. And we've got about 3 or 4 television shows we've got in development right now, and a documentary and a movie. And so the idea is that we may transition over into getting into just full content, like into television shows and movies and stuff, and bring one more production company into the realm of too many production companies for that.
Wow. Is there any?
It's exciting. We're looking forward to it. We've got a really neat idea for this one TV show that we're just getting ready to pitch, and if it works, I'll fill you in on it. And it could be a really good, fun Canadian comedy.
Wow. So you can do this till you're 90 years old if you wanted to. That's excellent. Don't
As long
stop,
as
man.
I have a mental capacity, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's good.
Yeah, for
Excellent.
sure, for sure. Yeah, I enjoy it. So we're going to keep doing that, and until we get bored, I suppose.
Oh, wow. Everyone, all the links will be supplying in the description. Just contact them. He's at infinitesd.com. What we do best is his portfolio. And also, we'll make sure that you're, you know, hire him. Everyone, hire him. Hire this guy. Know this guy. Went to high school together. Well, sort of. I really appreciate
Wonderful.
you taking the
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you, Patrick. I
You're
appreciate
very
it.
welcome, and thank you for your time too.
You're very
You take
welcome.
care. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
So we're going to close the stream. See you, Patrick.
Thank you. Take care. Bye now.
Wait, hold on. I got this. And